The rain had begun its rhythmic serenade against the expansive windows an hour ago, a gentle insistence that blurred the city lights into impressionistic smudges of gold and ruby. Ilara didn't mind. In fact, she welcomed it. The outside world, hushed and softened by the downpour, only intensified the intimate cocoon she had woven around herself within her penthouse apartment. She moved through the space with a languid grace, each step a testament to the silk robe that flowed around her, a deep amethyst hue that shimmered in the ambient light. Her skin, still warm from a long, rose-scented bath, hummed with a subtle tingle. A single glass of Cabernet, dark as the heart of a winter night, rested on the polished mahogany console. She lifted it, the cool crystal a pleasing contrast to the warmth of her fingers, and took a slow sip. The wine was robust, velvety on her tongue, leaving a trace of blackberry and spice that lingered, much like certain memories. The fire in the hearth crackled companionably, casting dancing shadows across the priceless tapestries and the soft leather of her chaise lounge. Music, a low, soulful jazz melody, pulsed from unseen speakers, weaving itself into the tapestry of the evening. It was a mood she cultivated with meticulous care, an atmosphere designed not just for comfort, but for a very specific kind of sensory awakening. Tonight, more than any other night, she needed every nerve ending attuned, every sense heightened. Her reflection in the darkened glass of the window showed a woman poised on the precipice of something exquisite. Her dark hair, still damp and gleaming, framed a face that held a quiet intensity. Her eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, held a distant, anticipatory gleam. She was waiting. Or perhaps, she was preparing to relive. The line between memory and present often blurred when it came to Hin. Julian. The name itself was a caress on her thoughts. Julian St. Clair. He was the embodiment of what she privately termed velvet S. Not just for his surname, but for the inherent texture of his presence. Velvet. Soft, luxurious, deep, yet with an undeniable strength and a directional pile that revealed different shades with every touch. And the S? Seduction, subtlety, sensation, and that singular silent strength that drew her in like a moth to a flame. She walked towards the window, pressing a palm flat against the cool pane, feeling the vibration of the city's distant pulse beneath the rain. It had been too long since she'd seen him, felt the brush of his hand, heard the low rumble of his voice that seemed to resonate deep within her bones. Their encounters were always rare, always potent, leaving an indelible mark that pulsed long after he was gone. He was a man who understood the art of anticipation, the slow, deliberate dance of desire, and she in turn was a willing, eager partner. Tonight, she had sent the text, a single, enigmatic word. "I will hit," in his reply, swift and just as understated. "Ing soon." Ugh. That single word had set her entire evening into motion, a meticulous ritual of preparation. The bath, the wine, the music, the soft lighting, each element a brushstroke on the canvas of her desire. She wasn't merely waiting for a man, she was preparing for an experience, a journey into the exquisite landscape of their shared sensuality. She turned from the window, her bare feet silent on the Persian rug. The scent of her perfume, a rich blend of sandalwood and jasmine, mingled with the faint aroma of wood smoke and the subtle, earthy sweetness of the wine. It was a scent that clung to her, a promise whispered to the air. She moved to the antique record player, its polished surface reflecting the firelight. She selected a different album, something richer, more melancholic, yet still imbued with an underlying rhythm that mirrored the quickening beat of her own heart. Etta James' voice filled the room, a soulful lament that spoke of longing and the sweet ache of love. Ilara closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, letting it dredge up the vivid memories that were always hovering at the edges of her consciousness. When Julian was near, she remembered the first time she had truly noticed him, not just as an acquaintance at a gallery opening, but as a force that could unravel her with a single glance. He had been standing across the crowded room, his silhouette framed by a piece of abstract art, and his eyes, a startlingly intense shade of hazel, had found hers. There was a directness there, a quiet confidence that bypassed all the superficial chatter and spoke directly to something primal within her. He had simply raised his glass in a silent toast, a subtle curve to his lips that was more suggestion than smile. And in that moment she had felt a jolt, a recognition that transcended words. It was as if her soul had whispered, "Yeah, there you are. Anne." Later that evening he had approached her. Not with the usual clumsy overtures or effusive compliments, but with a quiet ease that was utterly disarming. "Elara," he had said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent a shiver down her spine, "I've been admiring your work, and your presence, even more so." He had a way of speaking that made every word feel significant, as if it held a deeper meaning just for her. There was a gravity to him, an unhurried elegance that was intoxicating. He didn't touch her then, not physically, but his gaze, the way he held her in his focus, was a touch more profound than any casual brush of hands. It was an invitation, a challenge, a promise. Their subsequent encounters were always like that, a slow, delicious unfolding. Dinners where their knees would brush accidentally under the table, sending sparks through her veins. Conversations that delved into the depths of art, philosophy, and the unspoken language of human connection, always skirting the edge of something deeply personal. Every look, every shared silence, every slight inclination of his head as he listened to her, was a thread in the intricate tapestry of their developing intimacy. He never rushed. He never pushed. He simply was. And that, paradoxically, made her yearn for him all the more. He was a master of the unsaid, the lingering glance, the almost touch that left her skin tingling with an exquisite anticipation. That was the velvet sizz, the luxurious, deep, and subtly powerful sensation he evoked in her. She walked over to her vanity table, a heavy silver piece that reflected the warm glow of the lamps. Her fingers traced the cool glass of a small antique bottle of perfume, not the one she was wearing now, but one she had worn on a particularly memorable night with Julian. It was a heavier, muskier scent, reserved for moments of profound surrender. Not tonight, not yet. Tonight was still about the delicate dance of desire. Her eyes scanned the objects on the vanity. Her mother's pearl necklace, a silver hairbrush, a small, leather-bound journal. Each object held a story, a memory. But tonight, they were merely props in the play of her anticipation. She picked up a silk scarf, its fabric the same rich amethyst as her robe, and twirled it between her fingers. The softness, the delicate sheen. It reminded her of the touch she craved, the smooth caress of his hand on her skin. The way his lips felt, like velvet, against hers. A faint sound from the hallway outside her apartment caused her breath to catch. A subtle click, then the soft scrape of a key. Her heart gave a sudden, powerful lurch, a drumbeat against her ribs. He was here. She didn't move, not immediately. She wanted to savor this precise moment, this exquisite tension before the release. The music swelled, Etta's voice reaching a crescendo of raw emotion. The rain continued its steady rhythm. The fire crackled. The air in the room, already thick with scent and anticipation, seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. Then, the low thud of a door closing, soft yet resonant, followed by the gentle rustle of fabric, the quiet placement of something on a nearby table. He moved with such quiet efficiency, such an innate understanding of space, of presence. He always had. A shadow fell across the threshold of her living room, long and lean against the warm glow of the fire. Ilaris slowly turned, her heart hammering a rhythm against her ribs that mimicked the jazz music. Julian stood there, framed by the doorway, just as she remembered him, just as she had conjured him in her mind's eye. His dark hair, slightly damp from the rain, fell across his forehead. His eyes, those intense hazel eyes, met hers across the room, and in their depths, she saw the same quiet intensity, the same knowing warmth that always set her alight. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, the kind that spoke of understated elegance, the subtle gleam of fine wool. A single button on his jacket was undone, A concession to comfort, a hint of something less formal beneath the polished exterior. He held nothing in his hands, no briefcase, no umbrella, just the sheer force of his presence. A slow, deliberate smile touched his lips, a mere curve that promised everything. It wasn't wide or boisterous, it was intimate, meant only for her. "Elara," he murmured, his voice a low, rich baritone that seemed to vibrate through the very air, reaching into her, settling deep within her core. Each syllable was a caress, a recognition. It was the sound of velvets made manifest. She found her own voice, a little breathy, a little unsteady. "Julian. He didn't move from the doorway, yet his gaze traversed every inch of her, lingering on the silk of her robe, the curve of her neck, the slight flush on her cheeks. His eyes were a physical touch, more potent than any hand. She felt herself respond. A deep, warm blush spreading over her skin, a tightening in her belly. The air between them crackled, charged with unspoken history and undeniable longing. The world outside, the rain, the city, faded into irrelevance. There was only this room, this fire, this music, and the man who stood before her radiating a quiet power that both thrilled and calmed her. He took a single step into the room, then another, closing the distance between them with unhurried grace. Every movement was fluid, controlled, a testament to the elegant strength she knew lay beneath that fine suit. He smelled of rain and a subtle, sophisticated cologne that was uniquely his, a scent that always made her want to lean in closer, to breathe him in completely. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, to see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, to catch the faintest hint of his breath. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingered there, then returned to her eyes, seeking permission, offering a silent question. "You invited me," he said, his voice softer now, a whisper that wrapped around her like the finest silk. "Did you miss me?" The question hung in the air, weighted with layers of meaning. It wasn't just about absence, it was about the particular exquisite ache that only he could soothe. Her gaze held his, unwavering. A slow, sensual smile bloomed on her face, a silent answer that was more potent than any words. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling ever so slightly, and traced the line of his jaw, the faint stubble a delicious rasp against her fingertips. His skin was warm, firm. A shudder ran through her, a deep, satisfying tremor. "More than you know," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper, a confession offered in the intimate space between them. His eyes darkened, a flash of pure, unadulterated desire. His hand came up, covering hers where it rested on his jaw, his thumb stroking the back of her hand with a deliberate, gentle rhythm that sent shivers of pleasure cascading through her. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she had no desire to. Her body was already singing, harmonizing with the soulful jazz, with the rain, with the fire, with the sheer, intoxicating presence of Julian. His head tilted, his lips just inches from hers, the heat of his breath mingling with her own. Her eyes fluttered closed, anticipating the contact, the familiar, exquisite press of his mouth against hers. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant wail of Etta James, singing of love and longing and surrender. She could feel the subtle tremor in his hand where it held hers, a powerful man allowing a glimpse of his own anticipation. It only made her want him more, made her crave the touch that was both gentle and intensely powerful. His lips brushed hers, a feather-light touch, a teasing prelude that promised more. He lingered there, not quite kissing her, just tasting the air between them, letting the anticipation build to an almost unbearable pitch. Her breath hitched in her throat, a desperate plea for more. "Velvets," he murmured. The words a low rumble against her lips, and then, finally, his mouth descended, soft and firm, claiming hers in a kiss that was everything she remembered, and everything she had yearned for. His mouth was a revelation, familiar yet new, tasting of the storm outside and the warmth of the brandy, but most profoundly, tasting of Hao. It was a taste she'd unknowingly craved, a hunger that had gnawed at the edges of her soul for what felt like an eternity. The kiss deepened instantly, a fierce, tender urgency that left no room for hesitation. His lips moved over hers, with a practiced grace, firm and soft, coaxing a response that rose from the very core of her being. Her own lips parted, a silent invitation, and his tongue, warm and insistent, met hers in a dance as old as time, a primal language they both understood. A soft moan escaped her throat, swallowed by the intensity of his kiss. Her hands, which had been hovering, unsure, now found their purpose, reaching up to tangle in the thick, dark hair at the nape of his neck. It felt impossibly soft, yet resilient, anchoring her to him as the world tilted on its axis. He groaned in response, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through her, sending delicious shivers down her spine. His arms tightened around her, pulling her flush against his solid frame. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the tautness of his muscles beneath the soft wool of his sweater, the heat emanating from him seeping into her skin. He broke the kiss for only a breath, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes dark and heavy-lidded, searching hers. "Velvet, he whispered again, his voice husky with emotion, a mere rasp of sound that was more felt than heard. "God, I've missed this, I've missed you." The raw sincerity in his voice was a balm to her long, aching heart, a testament to the unspoken truth that had lingered between them for so long. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were tears of relief, of profound joy. She didn't need to speak. Her body spoke for her. She surged upward, her lips finding his again, hungrier this time, desperate to reclaim every lost moment, every unspoken word. This kiss was slower, deeper, a tender exploration that promised a vast landscape of pleasure. His hands, which had been holding her close, now began a slow, deliberate journey. One hand slid from her waist to the curve of her hip, pressing her closer still. The other moved upwards, tracing the delicate line of her spine, sending a shiver of exquisite sensation through her. She arched into his touch, a willing supplicant to the fire he was igniting within her. The scent of him, wood smoke, rain, and that uniquely masculine scent that was humane, filled her senses, intoxicating her, blurring the edges of reality. He lifted her effortlessly, a gasp catching in her throat as her feet left the ground. She wrapped her legs around his waist instinctively, her thighs brushing against the strong muscles of his hips. The friction was electric, a sudden, searing heat that made her breath hitch. He carried her like she weighed nothing, his eyes never leaving hers, a silent question, a burning promise. He didn't move far, only shifted her onto his lap, as he settled back onto the plush cushions of the sofa by the roaring fire. The crackle and pop of the logs in the hearth provided a rhythmic counterpoint to the rapid beat of her own heart. The storm outside raged on, a wild symphony of wind and rain, but within the cabin there was only warmth, light, and the burgeoning storm of their reunion. His lips left hers, trailing a path of fire down her jawline, to the sensitive curve of her neck. She tilted her head back, offering him access, her eyes fluttering closed as his mouth found the pulse point at her throat, a soft suckle that made her entire body tremble. "Yes," she breathed, a whisper of permission, of longing. His hand still exploring found the hem of her sweater. With a slow, deliberate movement, he began to push it upwards, his knuckles brushing against the soft skin of her stomach. The cool air of the cabin met her heated skin, only to be instantly replaced by the warmth of his touch. He worked the sweater up, over her ribs, past her breasts, until it was bunched around her shoulders. He paused, his eyes now molten pools of desire, gazing at her. "You're even more beautiful than I remember," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze lingering on the lace-trimmed camisole she wore beneath. It was a delicate garment, a whisper of silk and lace, doing little to conceal the swell of her breasts. Her cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire. She felt vulnerable, exposed, yet exquisitely cherished under his intense gaze. Her own hands, trembling slightly, reached for the buttons of his shirt. He watched her, a slow, sensual smile playing on his lips as she fumbled with the fastenings. The fabric was soft, well worn, and as each button came undone, a sliver of his warm skin was revealed. She savored the moment, the anticipation building with each new inch of him she uncovered. Finally, the last button was free. She pushed the shirt open, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, dusted with dark, inviting hair. She laid her palms flat against his skin, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her fingertips, a rhythm that mirrored her own. He was solid, warm, utterly real. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his collarbone, tasting the salt and musk of his skin. He shrugged the shirt from his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor in a soft heap. Then, with a gentle tug, he pulled her camisole over her head, discarding it with the same casual grace. Now only the delicate lace of her bra separated her from his bare chest. His gaze dropped to her breasts, a primal hunger in his eyes that made her nipples harden almost painfully. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace, teasing the fabric, brushing against the very edge of her skin. The anticipation was exquisite, a slow, torturous build-up that left her breathless. "Velvet ass," he repeated, his voice a low thrum against her ear as he leaned in, his lips just grazing the sensitive skin below her earlobe. "You have no idea how long I've dreamt of this. How many nights I've spent wishing you were here, just like this." His confession, raw and honest, melted any lingering reservations she might have had. She tightened her legs around him, instinctively seeking closer contact. He responded by shifting slightly, his hard arousal pressing against her, a clear, undeniable signal of his desire. A jolt of electric current shot through her, a wave of heat that started deep in her core and spread rapidly outwards. With a soft groan, he finally cupped her breasts through the lace, his thumbs brushing over her sensitive nipples. A gasp escaped her, her head falling back against the cushions as waves of pleasure washed over her. He leaned in, his lips replacing his thumbs, suckling gently through the lace, sending shivers through her entire body. She tangled her fingers in his hair again, holding him close, urging him on. He slowly unclasped her bra, the delicate sound of the hook releasing echoing loudly in the quiet cabin. The garment slid away, revealing her breasts in their full glory. He inhaled sharply, his eyes darkening further with raw desire. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice thick with admiration, before lowering his head. His mouth claimed one breast, drawing her deeply into his warmth, his tongue a velvet caress. It was a sensation that transcended mere pleasure, touching something ancient and primal within her. She arched against him, her fingers digging into his shoulders as waves of bliss coursed through her. He suckled, teased, and gently bit, his ministrations driving her to the brink of delirium. Then, with a soft sigh, he moved to the other breast, lavishing it with the same tender attention, leaving a trail of fire in his wake. Her body was a symphony of sensation, every nerve ending alive and humming. The heat of the fire on her back, the cool air on her bared skin, and the scorching heat of his mouth on her breasts. She felt utterly consumed, utterly cherished. He lifted his head, his gaze burning into hers. "Come," he whispered, and without another word he gently shifted, rising from the sofa with her still in his arms. He carried her effortlessly, her legs still wrapped around his waist, her head resting on his shoulder. The soft glow of the firelight painted their bodies in shades of gold and shadow as he navigated the short distance to the bedroom. The bedroom was a sanctuary, dimly lit by the flickering firelight filtering in from the living room, supplemented by the soft glow of a bedside lamp that cast warm, intimate shadows across the room. The air was cool and crisp, a delightful contrast to the heat radiating from their entwined bodies. The large inviting bed, piled high with soft duvets and plump pillows, looked like a haven. He lowered her gently onto the edge of the bed, his hands still on her waist, his eyes never leaving hers. Their bodies were still pressed together, the friction of their skin against each other a delicious torment. She could feel the hard ridge of his erection pressing against her stomach, a tangible promise of what was to come. With a slow, deliberate movement, He knelt before her, his hands still holding her. He looked up at her, his gaze filled with a reverence that made her heart ache with tenderness. "You are exquisite," he said, his voice a low rumble, and then he leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her inner thigh, just above the hem of her skirt. A shiver ran through her, a gasp escaping her lips. His lips were warm, soft, and utterly intoxicating. He straightened slowly, his hands now moving to the zipper of her skirt. Her breath hitched in her throat as he slowly, sensually, pulled the zipper down. The soft rasp of the metal was loud in the quiet room. He eased the fabric down her hips, over her thighs, until it pooled around her ankles. She lifted her legs slightly, and he pulled it away, tossing it onto a nearby chair with her sweater and camisole. Now, she wore only her delicate lace panties. He knelt before her again, his eyes devouring her, a slow, appreciative smile on his lips. "And just as I remember," he murmured, his fingers tracing the lace, barely brushing against the soft skin beneath. The intimacy of the moment was almost overwhelming. She reached for him, her fingers finding the belt buckle of his jeans. He leaned into her touch, allowing her to unfasten it, then the button. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled down the zipper, revealing the dark fabric of his boxer briefs, already straining with his desire. He inhaled sharply as her fingers brushed against him. "Easy, velvetess," he whispered, his voice a low growl, "or we might not make it to the bed." She smiled, a slow, knowing smile, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Isn't that the point?" she countered, her voice husky. He chuckled, a deep, rich sound that vibrated through her. He stood up, and she stood with him, their bodies still intimately close. He peeled off his jeans, letting them drop to the floor, then kicked them aside. Then, with a shared glance, he reached for her, pulling her close, letting her feel the full, undeniable heat of him through the thin barrier of their underwear. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure desire that left her trembling. She pressed herself closer, her hands finding his bare back, her fingers tracing the hard ridges of his muscles. The storm outside seemed to intensify, matching the tempest within them. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "Are you ready, my love?" he whispered, his voice a soft caress full of anticipation. "More than ready," she breathed, her voice barely audible, her body aching with a desperate need for him. He lifted her into his arms again, a sigh of contentment escaping her lips as he cradled her against his chest. He carried her to the bed, laying her gently on the cool sheets. The soft pillows cradled her head as she watched him, her eyes tracing every line of his powerful, beautiful body. He stood for a moment, silhouetted against the firelight, a magnificent primal figure, before climbing onto the bed beside her. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, giving them both time to savor the moment. He propped himself up on one elbow, gazing down at her, his eyes filled with a love and desire that mirrored her own. His hand reached out, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her hip, then moving upwards, over her stomach, to the hollow between her breasts. "You have no idea," he murmured, his voice thick, "how long I've waited to touch you like this again." She covered his hand with hers, pressing it to her heart. "And you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. He lowered his head, his lips finding hers in a tender, lingering kiss that was a promise, a prayer, a declaration. It was a kiss that spoke of history, of shared dreams, of a future yet to be written. His tongue danced with hers, a slow, sensual rhythm that built the tension to an almost unbearable pitch. His hand continued its journey, now slipping beneath the waistband of her panties, his fingers brushing against the soft curls at the apex of her thighs. A gasp escaped her, her body arching in response. He felt so good, so right, so utterly in him. He pulled her closer, until their bodies were pressed together, skin against skin, the last barrier between them a mere whisper of lace. The heat radiating from him was a delicious inferno, consuming her, melting her into a puddle of pure desire. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his tongue mirroring the intimate caress of his fingers. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, her body trembling with a mixture of longing and excitement. She felt herself opening to him, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. This was more than just physical pleasure. It was a reunion of souls, a homecoming. He broke the kiss, his lips trailing down her throat, over her collarbone, to the valley between her breasts. His hand moved lower, his fingers gently pushing aside the lace, finding the soft, sensitive skin of her inner thigh, then moving inward, teasing, exploring. She gasped, her hips arching instinctively, seeking the pressure, the delicious friction he was creating. "So wet for me, Velvet S," he whispered against her skin, his voice a low, knowing rumble that sent shivers of pleasure through her. "Just as I knew you would be." The intimate words, spoken with such tender confidence, made her blush, even as they ignited a deeper fire within her. She was indeed wet, aching for him, her body humming with a desperate need that bordered on pain. His fingers continued their exquisite torment, circling, teasing, finding the most sensitive points, driving her closer and closer to the edge. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, her mind dissolving into a haze of pure sensation. She moved against his hand, instinctively seeking more, begging for more, her body a coiled spring ready to release. He watched her, his eyes dark with passion, a slow, sensual smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying her pleasure, savoring every gasp, every tremor. He leaned in, his mouth finding hers again, taking her gasp into his own mouth, swallowing her pleasure, making it his. His touch grew firmer, more insistent, pushing her over the precipice, not quite to release, but to a state of heightened arousal, where every nerve ending screamed with exquisite pleasure. She writhed beneath him, her hands clutching his shoulders, her nails digging gently into his skin. "Please," she whimpered, the word barely audible, a desperate plea for release, for completion. He pulled back slightly, his eyes burning into hers. "Soon, my love," he promised, his voice thick with desire, "but first, I want to taste every inch of you." And with that, he shifted, moving lower on the bed, his gaze fixed on her. Her breath caught in her throat as he slowly, deliberately, began to push down her panties, drawing them slowly over her hips, down her thighs, until they hung precariously around her ankles. He paused, his eyes lingering, savoring the sight of her, bare and open to him. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken desire. The fire crackled, the wind howled, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart and the soft, rhythmic breaths of the man who held her captive with his gaze. He looked up at her, a silent question in his eyes, a promise of profound pleasure. She nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement, giving him her unspoken consent. He lowered his head, his dark hair brushing against her inner thighs, and then, finally, his mouth found her. The shock of his warm, wet mouth on her most intimate skin sent a jolt through her that made her cry out. It was more intense, more profound than anything she had ever experienced. His tongue was a revelation, exploring, tasting, teasing, drawing forth a pleasure so fierce, so exquisite, that her body arched off the bed. She was lost, utterly consumed by the sensations he was creating. Her hands clutched the sheets, her fingers digging into the soft fabric as wave after wave of pleasure washed over her. He was relentless, a master of his craft, driving her higher and higher, closer and closer to the edge. Her entire body was trembling, her hips bucking in an involuntary rhythm, desperate for release. His breath was warm against her, his mouth an incredible source of pleasure. He knew exactly where to touch, where to tease, where to linger. She could feel herself building, a delicious pressure coiling deep within her, growing more intense with every flick of his tongue, every gentle suckle. The world outside faded away, leaving only the exquisite pleasure of his mouth on her, the feeling of his strong hands gripping her thighs, holding her in place for his delicious ministrations. She was on the verge, the very precipice of climax, her body screaming for release, when he suddenly pulled back, his mouth leaving her, the sudden absence a sharp, aching void. A frustrated moan escaped her lips, her eyes flying open, bewildered. He looked up at her, his eyes dark with triumph and a wicked gleam of mischief. "Not yet, my velvetess," he whispered, his voice husky. "Not quite yet. We have all night, and I intend to savor every single moment of it." He moved back up the bed, settling between her legs, his bare chest pressed against her bare breasts. The sensation was electrifying, the heat of his skin against hers sending a renewed wave of desire through her. He kissed her deeply, a slow, tender kiss that was both a promise and a torment. His hand moved down, finding her again, his fingers replacing his mouth, stroking, teasing, bringing her back to the precipice, holding her there, suspended between exquisite pleasure and aching need. Her legs wrapped around his waist, drawing him closer, her body instinctively seeking the ultimate connection. The storm outside continued its wild dance, but inside a new, more powerful storm was just beginning to gather. Her legs wrapped around his waist, drawing him closer, her body instinctively seeking the ultimate connection. The storm outside continued its wild dance, but inside, a new, more powerful storm was just beginning to gather. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "My love?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her skin, a sound that vibrated deep within her, echoing the tremor already starting to build. His fingers, which had been deftly playing a symphony of pleasure, now paused, a deliberate, agonizing cessation that made her whimper. She arched against him, an unspoken plea, her hips rising, seeking what he withheld. He responded not with haste, but with a deep, consuming kiss that claimed her mouth, her breath, her very will. As their lips met, his hips shifted, a slow, deliberate movement that brought him to the threshold of her being. She felt the warm, insistent pressure, a promise of imminent release from the exquisite tension. Her breath hitched, a soft gasp caught in her throat as he began to slide, inch by tantalizing inch, into her. It was a sensation of profound rightness, a homecoming she hadn't consciously realized she craved until this moment. The world outside, with its furious wind and driving rain, faded into a distant hum. All that existed was the burgeoning warmth between them, the gentle friction, the steady, unwavering invasion of him, filling her completely. A sigh, long and contented, escaped her lips as he finally settled deep within her, a perfect fit that banished every lingering shadow of loneliness or incompleteness. He paused, allowing their bodies to adjust, to meld, to simply be in this newfound union. She could feel his heart thrumming against her breast, a strong, steady beat, mirroring her own erratic rhythm. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded with desire, met hers in the dim light, a silent conversation passing between them, a promise, a question, a profound understanding. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice hoarse, his gaze never leaving hers. He stroked a stray strand of hair from her damp forehead, his touch infinitely tender, a stark contrast to the raw power held coiled within him. Then slowly, he began to move. A gentle rock, a tentative withdrawal, a deeper return. Each movement was deliberate, a careful exploration of the boundaries of their shared pleasure. She wrapped her arms tighter around his neck, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them, their skin slick with the heat of their passion. Her legs tightened around his waist, guiding his rhythm, urging him deeper, faster, into the heart of the storm they were creating. The bed creaked softly in protest, a symphony of their ancient dance. The rain outside hammered against the window panes, a drumbeat to their rising crescendo. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the torrent of sensations. His scent, a heady mix of rain, his natural musk, and the subtle warmth of their arousal, filled her nostrils, intoxicating and addictive. The feel of his skin, warm and smooth against hers, was everywhere. His chest pressed to hers, his thighs brushing her own, his strong arms holding her captive in the most exquisite embrace. His rhythm deepened, becoming more insistent, more primal. Each thrust was a wave, building, pulling back, then crashing down with renewed force. She felt herself rising with him, carried on a tide of pure sensation. A low moan escaped her, raw and uninhibited, as he found a new depth, a new angle that sent shivers of delight through her core. Her hips began to move instinctively, matching his pace, meeting his every thrust with an eager lift of her own. "Look at me," he whispered, his voice thick with desire. And she opened her eyes. His face was etched with a passion so profound it took her breath away. His jaw was tight, his brow furrowed, but his eyes were alight with a fierce, tender love that made her heart ache with its beauty. In that moment she saw not just a lover but a soulmate, a companion in this wild, wonderful journey of life and desire. He kissed her then, a deep, open-mouthed kiss that tasted of longing and promise, his tongue dancing with hers, mirroring the ancient rhythm of their bodies. His hands moved from her back, tracing the curve of her spine, then settled on her hips, pressing her even closer, leaving no space for doubt, only for absolute, unadulterated pleasure. The pleasure intensified, building into an unbearable sweetness. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her body trembling on the brink of something monumental. She could feel the tightening deep within her, a coil of pure sensation winding tighter and tighter. He felt it too, his own movements becoming more frantic, more desperate, his breath catching in his throat. "You're so close, my love," he murmured against her lips, his words hot and urgent. "Let go. Let it take you." And she did. With a final powerful thrust from him, and an answering arch of her own body, the dam broke. A wave of pure, unadulterated ecstasy crashed over her, a blinding, all-consuming release that shook her to her very core. She cried out, a sound torn from the deepest part of her being, her nails digging gently into his shoulders as her body convulsed around him, clinging to him as if he were the only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. He followed her, his own groan of release echoing hers, his body stiffening, then shuddering violently as he poured himself into her, a testament to their shared passion. He collapsed onto her, heavy and sated, his breath ragged against her neck, his heart hammering against hers. For a long moment they lay entwined, the world spinning gently around them, the storm outside a distant echo of the tempest that had just raged within. Slowly, gradually, their breathing evened out. The tremors subsided, replaced by a profound sense of peace and utter contentment. He shifted slightly, lifting himself on his elbows, his gaze tender as he looked down at her, a soft smile gracing his lips. He pressed a kiss to her temple, then to her nose, then to her slightly parted lips, each one soft and lingering, a sweet balm after the intensity of their shared release. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his voice still hoarse, filled with a gentle concern that warmed her from the inside out. She nodded, a small, blissful smile playing on her lips. "More than all right," she managed, her voice a little shaky, still imbued with the lingering echoes of her climax. She tightened her arms around him, unwilling to let him move away, savoring the feeling of his weight, his warmth, his presence deep within her. He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her. "Good," he murmured, before gently withdrawing from her, a reluctant separation that left a pang of longing in its wake. He shifted, pulling her against him, spooning her body against his arm wrapping around her waist, his hand coming to rest possessively over her still thrumming core. The rain outside seemed to have softened its assault, now a gentle patter against the window, a lullaby compared to its earlier fury. The room was warm, filled with the mingled scents of their lovemaking, and the clean, earthy smell of the rain. She nestled back against him, feeling the solid strength of his body behind hers, the comforting rhythm of his breathing. "I love you," she whispered into the quiet, the words coming spontaneously, a purer expression of the overwhelming emotion that filled her. He pressed a kiss to her hair, his lips lingering. "And I, you, my darling, more than words can say." His hand, still resting on her, began to absent-mindedly stroke the soft skin of her belly, a gentle, soothing touch that slowly rekindled a simmering warmth deep within her. The afterglow was exquisite, a soft, golden haze that settled over them. But even in the tranquility, a quiet hunger began to stir, a slow, gentle hum that promised more. Her body, still exquisitely sensitive, responded to his light touch with a subtle arch, a silent invitation. She felt his body shift behind her, a mirroring of her own awakening desire. His lips found the sensitive skin behind her ear, tracing a path down her neck, sending shivers dancing across her skin. "Still feeling a little stormy, my love?" he teased softly, his voice a low purr that made her blush. She giggled, a breathy sound, and leaned back into his embrace, her hips subtly pressing against his. "Perhaps," she admitted, turning her head slightly so their lips could meet for a soft, lingering kiss. This kiss was different from the passionate ones before. It was tender, playful, filled with a deep affection that transcended the purely physical. His hand drifted lower, finding the soft curve of her inner thigh, his fingers gently tracing the delicate skin, sending a fresh wave of awareness through her. The earlier intensity had left her exquisitely attuned to every sensation, every touch. She felt herself softening, opening to him once more, a quiet invitation for him to return. He understood. He always understood. He moved slowly, deliberately, pulling her closer, pressing his hardness against her, a tender promise of what was to come. This time, there was no urgency, no frantic rush, only a deep, unhurried exploration of their renewed desire. He positioned himself, his body aligning with hers, and then, with a slow, careful precision, he entered her again. A sigh of pure contentment escaped her. This second entry was different, softer, deeper, a more profound melding of their spirits as much as their bodies. It felt like coming home, not just to a physical space, but to a soul connection that transcended the fleeting moments of passion. He began to move, a slow, languid rhythm that was utterly intoxicating. Each thrust was a gentle caress, a deep, sensual massage that seemed to awaken every nerve ending in her body. She lay still, letting him set the pace, savoring every exquisite sensation, every slow, deep penetration. Her legs were still wrapped around him, but loosely now, a gentle embrace rather than a desperate clinging. He whispered soft words against her hair, words of love, of adoration, of how beautiful she was, how much he cherished her. His voice, husky and warm, wove itself into the fabric of her pleasure, making each touch, each movement, even more profound. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming joy and gratitude for this man, for this moment, for this love that filled her to overflowing. This second journey was a slower burn, a deeper dive into the depths of their intimacy. The tension built gradually, a gentle, insistent pressure that spread through her veins, warming her from the inside out. Her breath became more rapid, her body began to tremble again. But it was a softer tremor, a more nuanced anticipation. He leaned back, supporting himself on his elbows, allowing her to see his face once more. His eyes were softer now, filled with a gentle passion, a deep, unwavering love. He watched her, his gaze unwavering, as her pleasure built, as her lips parted in a silent plea, as her body began its slow, inevitable climb towards release. His pace quickened, subtly at first, then with more deliberate intention, driving her higher and higher. The feeling within her intensified, a sweet ache that begged for release, for completion. She arched her back, her fingers finding his hair, pulling him closer, her hips lifting to meet his every thrust. "Yes," she gasped, the word torn from her throat, her voice raw with longing. "Please, yes." And then, with a final powerful surge, he brought her there again. The climax was softer this time, less explosive, more widespread, a warm, expansive wave that washed over her, settling deep in her core, leaving her trembling and utterly sated. She felt him follow her moments later, his body stiffening, a guttural groan escaping his lips as he pulsed deep within her. He collapsed onto her again, his weight a welcome comfort, his breath mingling with hers. They lay tangled together, bodies sated, hearts full, as the last vestiges of the storm outside whispered a gentle farewell. The air in the room was thick with their mingled scents, their shared passion, their profound love. He pulled the duvet up higher, tucking it around them both, cocooning them in warmth and intimacy. She rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. The world outside had faded completely, leaving only the quiet comfort of their shared space, the gentle sounds of their breathing, and the profound contentment that settled over them like a soft, velvet blanket. She was drifting, hovering on the edge of sleep, yet exquisitely aware of every nuance of his presence. His arm tightened around her, a possessive, loving gesture that spoke volumes. The storm had passed, both outside and within, leaving behind a tranquil calm, a sense of peace that promised dreams as sweet as the night they had just shared. The night, however, was still young, and the gentle rise and fall of their breaths together promised a long, undisturbed slumber, a shared silence that was more eloquent than any words. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that this was just the beginning of their story, a beautiful, passionate saga waiting to unfold with the dawn. The night, however, was still young, and the gentle rise and fall of their breaths together promised a long, undisturbed slumber, a shared silence that was more eloquent than any words. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that this was just the beginning of their story, a beautiful, passionate saga waiting to unfold with the dawn. She stirred, a soft sigh escaping her lips as his arm tightened almost imperceptibly around her waist, pulling her flush against the warmth of his body. The world outside their cocoon of sheets and skin had indeed settled into a deep quiet, the distant city hum a mere whisper against the profound silence of their shared space. But within, a different kind of energy still hummed, a gentle current of lingering sensation and burgeoning emotion. Her fingers, still tingling from the journey they had taken across his skin, found their way to his chest, tracing the steady rhythm of his heart. It was a strong, reassuring beat, a counterpoint to the softer flutter she felt in her own. She closed her eyes, savoring the scent of him. A primal, masculine fragrance mingled with the sweet, musky perfume of their recent passion. It was intoxicating, anchoring her to this moment to him. He shifted slightly, his chin resting against the crown of her head, his breath a warm whisper in her hair. "Comfortable?" he murmured, his voice thick with sleep and tenderness, a low rumble that vibrated through her. She hummed in assent, burrowing deeper into his embrace. "More than comfortable," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper against his skin. "Content." A soft chuckle vibrated through his chest. "Content," he repeated, the word sounding like a precious secret. His hand, which had been resting on her hip, now moved slowly, deliberately, up her side, his thumb grazing the soft curve of her breast. A shiver, light as a butterfly's wing, traced its way down her spine. The tranquility she had felt moments ago began to ripple, stirred by this renewed, gentle exploration. He kissed the top of her head, a lingering, soft press of his lips. "You feel like you were made to fit right here," he whispered, his voice a low, intimate confession. The words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her, echoing the certainty that had settled in her soul. She tilted her head back slightly, her gaze meeting his in the dimness. His eyes, even in the faint light filtering through the curtains, held a depth she found endlessly captivating. A mix of wonder, desire, and a burgeoning affection that mirrored her own. She saw a reflection of her own vulnerability, her own hope, in their dark pools. "And you," she breathed, her hand rising to cup his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her palm. "You feel like home." The intimacy of the moment deepened, the air between them thick with unspoken understanding. His thumb continued its slow, hypnotic dance, igniting a warmth that spread through her veins, chasing away any lingering chill of the night. Her body, already softened by pleasure, began to awaken again, a delicious, languid stretch of desire. His gaze dropped to her lips, a silent question passing between them. She answered with a slight parting of her own, a subtle invitation. His head descended slowly, giving her ample time to meet him, to surrender to the inevitable. This kiss was different from the others. It was slower, more deliberate, a tender exploration that promised a deeper dive into the wellspring of their connection. His lips were soft, coaxing, tasting of a shared sweetness that made her ache for more. She responded with an equal measure of longing, her own lips parting to welcome his deeper press. It began as a whisper of a kiss, then bloomed into a gentle persuasion, his tongue tracing the delicate curve of her upper lip before seeking entry. She granted it willingly, her breath catching in her throat as their tongues met, a slow, sensual dance that mirrored the unfolding rhythm of their heart. There was no rush, only a profound sense of mutual discovery, a quiet unraveling of defenses. His hand left her breast, gliding down her side to her waist, then lower, tracing the curve of her hip before settling on her thigh. The simple touch was electric, a spark that reignited the embers of their passion. She arched into his touch, a soft murmur escaping her lips as his fingers began a gentle rhythmic caress against the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. "Beautiful," he breathed against her lips, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes, his voice rough with emotion. "You are so beautiful." Her cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the physical touch, and everything to do with the sincerity in his voice. "You make me feel beautiful," she confessed, her voice barely audible. He smiled, a slow, tender curving of his lips that sent another flutter through her chest, only reflecting what's already there. With that, he deepened the kiss, a soft urgency now infusing his movements. His body shifted, a quiet rustle of sheets, as he moved over her, supporting himself on his elbows, his weight a comforting presence. The moonlight, now a sliver through the gap in the curtains, cast a soft silvery glow across his shoulders, highlighting the lean planes of his back. Her hands found their way to his hair, her fingers tangling in the silken strands at his nape, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss, until it was a breathless melding of mouth and souls. The world outside their embrace faded into irrelevance, leaving only the exquisite sensation of his body against hers, the taste of him on her tongue, the sound of their mingled breaths. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving her time to meet his pace, to synchronize their desires. His hips pressed gently against hers, a soft, teasing friction that sent shivers of anticipation through her. Her own body responded with an eager readiness, a deep pulsating ache blooming between her thighs. "Are you with me?" he whispered, his voice a husky plea, his lips brushing against her earlobe, sending a fresh wave of sensation through her. "Always," she breathed, her answer more a feeling than a word, a surrender to the exquisite current that flowed between them. He took her at her word, his movements becoming more assured, more confident. He kissed her neck, the hollow of her throat, trailing a path of fire down to her collarbone. Her head fell back, granting him full access, her fingers digging gently into his shoulders as pleasure began to build, a slow, intoxicating crescendo. His hand, which had been caressing her thigh, now moved with a feather-light touch, exploring the sensitive skin of her inner fold. A gasp escaped her lips, a soft involuntary sound of pure delight as his fingers found the very core of her desire. He worked with an exquisite gentleness, eliciting shivers and soft moans, preparing her for the intimate union that was to come. The air grew thick with their desire, the scent of their mingled arousal a heady perfume in the quiet room. Her hips began to move instinctively, an ancient rhythm taking hold, urging him closer, deeper. She felt the subtle shift of his body, as he aligned himself, a brush of skin against skin that promised the sweet release she craved. He paused for a moment, his eyes searching hers in the dim light, a silent question, a plea for complete consent. She met his gaze, her own eyes wide with longing, a fervent yes unspoken but clearly understood. With a slow, deliberate movement, he entered her, a deep, fulfilling stretch that made her arch her back, a soft cry escaping her lips. He filled her completely, utterly, a perfect fit that felt both new and eternally familiar. The world narrowed to this singular, exquisite sensation, this profound merging of two into one. He held still for a moment, allowing her body to adjust, to embrace his presence. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper still, her body trembling with the intensity of the moment. Her fingers raked through his hair, her nails gently scraping his scalp, a primal response to the overwhelming pleasure. Then, he began to move, a slow, measured rhythm that built with each thrust, each withdrawal. It was a dance of exquisite precision, a symphony of touch and sensation. He watched her, his eyes never leaving hers, gauging her reactions, responding to her every sigh, her every tremor. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the tide of sensation, her mind emptying of everything but him. The rocking motion became faster, more insistent, a delicious friction that pushed her closer and closer to the precipice of release. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her body taut with anticipation. "Look at me," he whispered, his voice raw with his own escalating pleasure. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze. She saw the raw desire there, the profound connection, the shared journey they were on. It was a moment of pure vulnerability, pure intimacy, an unspoken promise exchanged in the silent language of lovers. With a final, powerful surge, she felt the wave break over her, a cascading torrent of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Her body convulsed, a deep, shuddering release that echoed through every nerve ending. A cry tore from her throat, muffled against his shoulder as he held her tight, moving with her, joining her in that exquisite descent. He followed her moments later, a deep groan rumbling from his chest as he emptied himself into her, his body rigid with climax. He buried his face in her hair, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart hammering against hers. They lay tangled together, spent and satisfied, the aftershocks of their passion rippling through their bodies. The room, once charged with electric desire, now settled into a soft, contented hum. His weight on her was comforting, a warm, heavy blanket that promised security and belonging. Slowly, gently, he shifted, rolling to his side and pulling her with him, spooning her close against his chest. His arm wrapped around her, his hand resting possessively on her stomach. Her back nestled against his front, the curve of her body fitting perfectly into his. The quiet returned, a deeper, richer silence than before, filled with the soft sounds of their breathing, the fading echo of their heartbeats. She felt utterly cherished, profoundly loved, in a way she hadn't known was possible. This man, with his gentle strength and passionate heart, had unlocked something deep within her, a capacity for love and joy that felt boundless. "Sleep now, my love," he murmured, his voice a soft, drowsy rumble against her ear, his lips brushing the sensitive skin of her nape. "Rest." And she did. The exhaustion of such profound intimacy, combined with the deep contentment that settled over her, pulled her swiftly into the welcoming embrace of sleep. She drifted, cradled in his arms, feeling utterly safe, utterly cherished. Dreams, she knew, would be sweet and vivid tonight. She awoke slowly, gently, to the sensation of soft light against her eyelids. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure of where she was. Then the warmth of the body pressed against her back, the scent of his skin, the gentle rise and fall of his chest, brought it all rushing back. A soft smile touched her lips. It was morning. The promise of the dawn. She lay still for a moment, savoring the feeling of him, the quiet intimacy of the post-sleep embrace. The curtains, pulled back slightly by the morning breeze, allowed slivers of golden light to dance across the room, illuminating dust motes in the air, like tiny shimmering stars. The city sounds were different now. A gentle hum of awakening, birdsong filtering through the window, a distant siren, all softened and made beautiful by the context of their shared space. She risked a glance over her shoulder, finding him still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful in the morning light. His dark hair was tousled, a few strands falling across his forehead. His strong jaw was softened by sleep, and a faint stubble shadowed his chin. He looked even more handsome in this vulnerable state, and a pang of tenderness, sharp and sweet, went through her. She traced the outline of his arm with her fingers, careful not to wake him. He stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping his lips, and she froze, her heart fluttering. His eyes, heavy-lidded, slowly opened, blinking against the light. They found hers, and a slow, tender smile spread across his face. A smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "Morning," he whispered, his voice still thick with sleep, but infused with a warmth that melted her. "Morning," she replied, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. He pulled her closer, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," she admitted, the truth of it startling her with its intensity. "And you?" "Like a dream," he murmured, his lips still resting against her skin. "A very good dream." He pulled back slightly, propping himself up on an elbow, his gaze sweeping over her face. "You look beautiful in the morning light." She felt a blush creep up her neck. "You're just saying that." "No," he said, his voice firm. "I mean it. Untouched, pure, radiant." His fingers gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. "More beautiful than ever." His sincerity was disarming. She felt herself open to him, a vulnerable blossom unfurling in the warmth of his gaze. "I feel different," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "Lighter. Like something important has shifted." He nodded, his eyes holding hers with an intense understanding. "Me too, like I've been waiting for this, for you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, a quiet declaration that transcended the simple act of lovemaking. It was a promise, a recognition of a deeper connection that had been forged in the crucible of the night. He leaned in, kissing her softly, chastely, a gentle morning kiss that was full of affection and lingering passion. "Breakfast?" he offered, his voice a low rumble. "I'd like that," she said, her stomach rumbling in agreement. They disentangled themselves from the sheets, their movements slow and languid, limbs still heavy with the sweet exhaustion of the night. The air was cool against her bare skin, but the warmth of his presence was enough to chase away any chill. As she reached for her robe, he caught her hand, pulling her back gently. "Wait," he said, his eyes twinkling. He reached for his own shirt, lying discarded on the floor, and pulled out his phone. "Proof." She laughed, a light, joyful sound as he captured a quick, candid photo of them together in the soft morning light, their faces still flushed with sleep and contentment, a picture of pure, unadulterated happiness. "A souvenir," he grinned, "of the morning after." "And the morning of," she corrected, her heart swelling with a profound sense of hope. "The morning of everything." They dressed in comfortable clothes, moving around the apartment with a comfortable ease that spoke of a familiarity far beyond a single night. She watched him move in his kitchen, making coffee, the scent of rich brewing grounds filling the air, mingling with the last traces of their shared passion. He hummed softly to himself, a simple, happy tune. They sat at the small kitchen table, mugs of steaming coffee warming their hands, the morning sun streaming through the window, painting stripes of gold across the floor. They spoke in soft tones, about inconsequential things, about their favorite books, about dreams they'd had, about plans for the day. But beneath the surface of their words, a deeper conversation was taking place, a silent affirmation of the profound bond that had formed between them. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "I don't want this to end," he said, his voice soft but firm, his gaze direct and unwavering. Her heart leaped. "It won't," she promised, squeezing his hand. "This is just the beginning?" And as she looked into his eyes, seeing the reflection of her own burgeoning love, she knew it was true. The night had been a symphony of desire and intimacy, a beautiful prelude. But the dawn, with its promise of new light and new beginnings, was an overture to a future she was now ready to embrace, hand in hand with him. The story they had started last night was indeed a saga, and she couldn't wait to turn the page. The satisfaction in her soul was complete, yet open-ended, a perfect balance of contentment and anticipation,